So welcome to ELT in Chile, a podcast about teaching English in Chile, and also we interview people from other countries as well. So in this space, Kevin and I, we talk to teacher trainees and academics who like to share their experiences and expertise in various aspects of English language teaching, as I said, in Chile and globally. So in this video episode, we will be talking to Dr. Malba Barahona, who will be talking to us about teaching English in Chile. So Malba is an educational researcher and language teacher educator, an associate professor at Facultad de Educación Pontificia Universidad Católica de Chile. Malba holds a PhD from the Australian National University, a Master in Linguistics from the Universidad de Chile, and a degree in teaching of English from Universidad Metropolitana Ciencias de la Educación. Malba has been teaching in higher education institutions over the last 20 years in the fields of foreign language learning, second language teacher education, applied linguistics, and cultural historical activity theory. She has done research on EFL teachers' beliefs, praxis-based approaches, teachers' learning, teacher identities, teacher agency, affordances, constraints of the practicum, university-school partnerships, language learning policies, and the use of emerging technologies in foreign language learning and teaching. So Malba, thank you very much for accepting our invitation.
Thank you for inviting me. It's it's really nice to be talking about these issues. Thank you.
Yeah. Welcome and thank you from me as well, Malba. If we can just dive right into the conversation, what would you say are the greatest challenges of teacher education in Chile these days? If this could be answered in one in one leg, what would be the thing that you'd point out as this is what we're really struggling with in teacher education in Chile?
Big question, because it's difficult to answer just kind of in a couple of sentences, but I'll do my best. Mm-hmm. And I will start with a bit of history in terms of my own history as a researcher. My research question as a PhD student quite a few years ago was about how teachers of English learn to teach. Mm-hmm. And I explored different factors that influence, mediate that learning. Well, that same question is the one that has occupied my whole life. And why do I link it to the challenges of teacher education? Because that's it. Challenges of teacher education, and better to say how we prepare teachers and how teachers learn, is challenging in itself. It's not an issue of kind of Chile only. It's a global issue. And there are many things that we already know about what influences the learning, teachers' learning, what the affordances of that learning, and also the constraints. So specifically in our context, I think probably there are three main issues, main challenges about teacher education. I would say it's like the teacher education programs struggle with the balance of, let's say, content knowledge. What is the knowledge? What is the basic knowledge that teachers need to develop, need to acquire in the initial teacher education programs? So why I say they struggle? Because, of course, they define what should be that knowledge, and then they try to implement it, and then, of course, teachers have to demonstrate that knowledge. But of course, that's problematic in itself, because complexity of kind of the teaching and schools every day is more and more complex, and new things arise and emerge. So that preparation or that knowledge is never enough. And one thing that teacher education programs do, it's more of this, more of that, more of X, Y, and Z. And the effect of that, the impact is very limited. And actually, it's like, no, it proves to the teacher education programs, this doesn't work. So that's a challenge, to define what the content knowledge, and actually what's the role of teacher education, the initial teacher education. You cannot, it's impossible to think that a teacher should know everything before they start. And actually, I think a good comparison is with doctors. Okay, medicine, it's a challenging and demanding a program in itself. It's long and quite demanding. But after that, after the 7 years, they are general doctors, GPs, yeah? Mm-hmm. If you want to have any sort of a specialization, the thing continues, and it's not. And nowadays, that's the common case. So a doctor is studying 10, 12 years probably in average, even more. And I think teachers, that's the thing as well. I mean, to start, you need now we have decided into the 5-year programs, but that's kind of the basic level. And then we need to acquire different things. So that's one challenge, as I said, the contents. What's the minimum? What are the contents? And not only contents in terms of contents or fields, areas of the studies, but of course, we're talking about knowledge, skills, and attitudes as well, or dispositions, as some people call them too. So those 3 things need to be included in that initial thing, in what we're going to consider as talking about the knowledge base of the program. That's one thing. Second thing, it's the lack of or the gap, disparity between what is taught in the education programs and what happens in schools. This is not new. This is super old. This probably it's part of what education is, because it will be very, very difficult to have like a synergy between these 2 contexts, because they are different. They've got different objects. I mean, in terms of objectives, the mission of the school is very different from the mission of a teacher education program, or especially a university teacher education program as we see it in Chile. So that kind of gap, disparity, very, very different, and kind of very difficult to find kind of a third place, we're going to call it, so that people can meet, can talk, and can, of course, meet the different needs. So that's super challenging. I know programs have done quite a bit in that. I mean, if we think in the last probably 20 years, teacher education programs have changed radically in terms of that. I mean, 20 years ago, it was very common that teacher education program, 5-year teacher education programs would only consider 1 practicum at the end of the cycle. So that was the thing. Nowadays, that's like, what are you talking about? Of course not. I mean, the minimum a teacher education program now in Chile has 3 practicum, and it's much more common to have 6 or even 7. So that's to say one or twice or 2 experiences, school-based experiences in the year. So that kind of what has happened is that teacher education programs have given the responsibility of that connection between the school and university to the practicum, as if the practicum itself would sort out the issues of like, okay, we're teaching or we're preparing teachers for that school. Well, it's your job to actually do that, kind of the practicum, as if the other part of the curriculum were not aligned or linked to that experience. So that would be the second challenge, kind of the connection or the gap, or how can I say, or the link, let's be, I mean, in more positive terms, how we can strengthen the relationship between schools and university programs. So that would be the second challenge. And the third challenge, and this is super, and kind of probably has been made more explicit lately, it's the point. What's the point of becoming a teacher, and in this case, a teacher of English? The purpose. And that kind of, I would say, in the last years, I would say in the country, there has been kind of more, it's being problematized a bit more. Why is it that we want teachers of English? What's the point of learning and teaching English today? Shall we continue looking at kind of just kind of what happens in the States or in the UK? Is that the thing? Is that our aspiration? Or the typical, or the never-ending conversation between kind of being a non-native speaker versus a native speaker? So when we prepare teachers, are we preparing them to be native-like? And what does that mean? Yeah. So it's a problematization of that and kind of the purpose. This is even more challenging than the other 2 issues, because it goes to the core of kind of what, and the thing of teacher of English, that English thing, that's the problem here, I would say. So now we know there are different voices saying kind of, hey, English today is not the language of just a group of people. Well, it hasn't been for quite a while. However, kind of making more the point, like, okay, it's not just the language of some group of people or from specific countries, but more like an international language, and that allows us to get to know many other people and many other things. Yeah, but anyhow, that is still quite problematic, and even in I'm talking kind of in terms of, I think we've got kind of contradictions about. If we believe in that or if we don't, because to a certain extent we say, yeah, of course, but at the same time, part of the policies and regulations about English language teachers say about kind of the level of English as probably kind of the most important thing. It's not that I agree with that, but that's kind of when they're hiring teachers, or even one of the things that typically test they have to sit for, that would be the one to sit for, whereas other areas are not tested. So that that's something that, of course, drives kind of the preparation. So there is more emphasis in one area rather than another. And I think this last challenge, I would say it's the least probably explored, because it requires research and actually also practical things. How do you prepare teachers of English with a different view, with a different perspective? And you need to do a lot to have like a plan. When we were talking before about kind of what would be the knowledge base of a teacher. So traditionally you can say certain things, but if you want to change that, well, that requires, it's much easier to criticize it rather than actually doing it. And that requires a lot of effort. And look, even in kind of the community, I would say, in this very little community, you would find different perspectives. But I'm going to say there is also lack of a scholarship as well. Because of different reasons, the scholarship, I mean, kind of the people who study these things in our countries, I mean, a very reduced number, and also with, of course, very limited resources too. I'm sorry if I took quite a while to answer this question, but of course,
this was absolutely fantastic.
The issue is super big, and as I told you, kind of, I started with one research question when I did my PhD, and I still continue doing it. It's kind of the answer is. Well, there is not a single answer as well.
No, thank you, Malba. It was a tough question, or like a very, very broad question to start with. But one thing that I found really interesting, what I also thought about when I actually drafted this question, you talked about attitude. You talked about attitude towards English and Englishes to bring the plural form of it into the conversation. And I wonder how this attitude, I mean, when we talk about teaching English in a metropolitan context, say Santiago, this may be a very different context with very different attitudes than when we're going down in the deep south of Chile, or into the more countryside, into more rural areas. Do you have any idea, any outlook on how attitudes may be different, or how these attitudes towards English could maybe different or change?
Well, it's a difficult matter because I mean we would have to start defining what attitude is, and kind of this disposition, like having a disposition towards something. That's kind of what I meant, what I mean by an attitude. And of course, different attitudes toward English and toward Englishes. And of course, it would depend. I mean, they depend and they change. You mentioned one factor, geography. Definitely, of course. I imagine people living in the south very different. And not in the south. I mean, living in a rural area different from metropolitan area. I'm thinking about Chillán, for example. Chillán is a small city, but very different. The city people who live in the city rather than in the mountain. In the mountain there. Of course, it would be different. few years ago, I had the chance to get to know and experience in Valle del Elqui. Teachers, there in the teaching English at elementary level from first grade. So what Municipalidad did was hiring one teacher and driving that teacher to the different schools, a very rural area. Yeah, Vicuña, talking that's big compared to the towns that those teachers had to go. So small, like Municipalidad Paiwano, that municipalidad, and then they hired the teacher and they drove that teacher one day in one school, one in another, and etc. And there would be another teacher in the school that did a bit more, but actually the English teacher would go around. And I talked to those teachers, and actually it was very interesting because, as you said, they had a very different attitudes and also toward kind of English is and the use of English and the purpose of teaching English too. In that case, and at that time, the teachers of English were very committed to teaching English to young learners as one kind of the opportunity, as kind of giving these students an opportunity that other students in the rest of the country already had. It was given, but for them it was not. It still is the case that actually the teachers go for one day for a couple of hours to each school because they cannot have one teacher in each school because we're talking about very tiny schools, and also the curriculum is not compulsory at that level, so they don't have to actually provide it. So it's kind of the extras that Municipalidad agrees with other foundations, etc. So the teachers felt at that time, and I still think it's the case, that it's given the opportunity, kind of broadening the opportunities for those kids in these rural areas. Also, that was kind of general for the teachers that I interviewed, but some others were very concerned about labor market. Very related to the jobs that those students would get, and so they would think about providing English so that then these students could work in tourism, so in touristic activities, and they could do that. And actually, they gave me lots of examples in which children already were helping their families, with rentals, renting cabins and services at small shops like, restaurants and things like that. And 10-year-old kids were helping parents to translate the names of certain food or the ingredients, and also even talking to kind of tourists. So there were these two sort of, I would say, trends, and kind of that's, of course, it's based on certain knowledge that they got as teachers, but also it's an attitude toward opening new avenues. They talked a lot about kind of broadening the spectrum, broadening opportunities for those children, because they felt that they were sort of left behind if they didn't have English classes. So that was an attitude toward it. They didn't have, I would say, at that time, like a very specific attitude toward sort of one specific English. It was more like this desirability of what English could bring, like a language, like or more than the language, is what comes with that idea of English. Okay, more people, different people, and also, as I said, it's closely related to labor market and economic opportunities as well.
Absolutely, I think that's one of the. I mean, if we think about our Chilean reality, sure, that's like if you ask people, they would say like, job opportunities, like what English can actually, let's say, offer students. My family's from the 4th region, so I'm pretty close to, let's say, that area, especially like tourism, because of the pisco industry. There are many opportunities, let's say, related to.
Yeah, that's right. Yes. And then in other regions, another region from the north, I'm going to mention Atacama, and then it's, instead of tourism, they mention mining company, and kind of if they work with machinery, they need to do English, and if they do in the business of the mining, also because they have to deal with the big mining companies, the transnational companies from Australia, from the States, etc. So they need to speak English to, of course, talk in equal terms with the other colleagues from international companies. So that's one of the things. But in the south, talking to kind of people from Ninth Region and even from Chillán, yes, again, they mentioned tourism. Valdivia, for example, kind of it's highly present as well. But in places like Chillán, it's a bit different, I would say, because there isn't like a clear connection between there isn't like a very clear instrumental issue. Yeah, like kind of, as we mentioned before, like tourism or mining. In these cases, kind of, well, yeah, yes, but no. It's in a more generic sense, like learning English, I would gain something. Yeah, it would be better for me. So it's less instrumental or less clearly linked to one specific area. Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, very good, very good.
So you have basically, so you basically what you've observed, Malba, is that depending on where in Chile you are, the motivation or the drive or the necessity to be able to communicate in English may differ quite considerably.
Yeah, definitely. But it's also kind of in terms of and then Santiago. Santiago is kind of, okay, you can find all those motives that we mentioned before and more. Yeah. Because all those motives. So Santiago is a different story, I would say, because we've got, you can do whatever you want in the end. And from Chile perspective, if you live in Santiago, you will have access to more opportunities, better opportunities as well. But it's all kind of, but it's not only, I would say, the place, the region. It's also other things as well. For example, I'm going to say Punta Arenas and Valparaíso have had extensive contact with English-speaking people for 200 years. Yeah. So there is a different type of motive there. Yeah. I would say more cultural in terms of kind of, I don't know, in Valparaíso, in the fifth region, more than the city of Valparaíso, in the fifth region, there is still this aspiration of being educated like English used to educate their students. Yeah. And it's not related to what happens in England now and not what happened in England 100 years ago. It's what they did here, because they taught their own children in a very different way to Chileans at that time. I'm talking about the late 1800s and beginning of 1900. So, and that changed it's a different motive. It's not only for labor market, but also belonging to a community. Even though now kind of the ties are far, kind of distant, still kind of this community. I belong to this community. And language, as we know, is the link, is one of the link, a very, very important link, to be in that community. So I would say kind of, cities like Valparaíso, Punta Arenas, also Antofagasta as well, because of the nitrate, or the nitrate mining in Chile that is still quite present. So, and in terms of the structure, but also community, I would say. So there are other motives, and they are rooted in kind of history. They're, kind of national history, but also their personal history.
Yeah. It's a rather complex issue. Yeah, absolutely. If we look at the history, I remember going to Humberstone a couple of months ago, and you can find the history of English culture mixed with a really small town, and how children were they had to learn English because the company was British.
Yeah.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you very much. And now let's say I know that you were working on a book that was recently published, edited by Leonardo Ledesma, yourself and Stephen Darwin, critiquing the teaching and learning of English in Chile. What was the objective behind this beautiful project? Yes.
Well, what was behind? Look, I was doing kind of part of my fund this year, which had to do with teacher education and kind of educating teachers. And that, of course, allowed me to talk to many people and, of course, do some research about that. And then talking to, as I said, to different kind of colleagues, we saw the need to give voice to local researchers, and in two areas. One, of course, teacher education, which is, I would say, kind of the area that I have researched the most, but also open it to ELT more broadly as well. So that's what we did. We made a call. I mean, we started with, this came, as I told you, is kind of something that came up as a need by different researchers and colleagues. And then we made an open call. And we wanted, and when we got together and decided what the call was going to be about, we wanted to frame it under kind of a critical perspective because of what we were talking before. There have been historical issues and economic drives why English has been taught and has been learned in Chile. But we also thought that this was an opportunity to give voice to other perspectives, and to problematize that. Yes, this has happened for 100 years. Do we want this to continue in the same way? Is it the same today than 100 years ago? So we started with that idea. And in teacher education, the same. We have been preparing teachers like this and that. Has been that effective? And more than effectiveness, what does that mean? Problematizing the issue as well. So that kind of was the origin of the book. We got together, we made an open call, and then we started working. Many people submitted their abstracts, and we had to choose. And it was a very difficult thing to do because I don't know how many chapters does it have, probably 14, 15, sorry. And but we received 30, I would say, 30 sort of good abstracts, I would say. But then we decided on, as I said, kind of that it met this thing of being kind of that it could report some research that was locally done, that it was in Chile, but also that it provided either problematized an issue regarding ELT or English language teacher education, or that it could also provide experiences of transformation. That's to say that from that critique, then we move into action. So that's kind of the thing. And then we came out with a book in two parts. One that it's focused on teacher education, English language teacher education, and another one on aspects in special school kind of based experiences. And this idea in both parts, like problematizing, but also providing some ideas on some experiences on how to transform and change that thing that we see as a problem. So that's kind of the story of the book. Something I think it's important to say, why did we do... Well, people, not yet. They haven't asked me why I did it with Routledge. In another book, they asked me about that. And at that time, I was not very conscious about the reasons. Now I am. Because, the international voice is super important because something very important is to produce local research, but it's not good enough just to talk among ourselves. We need to talk to other people. So it has to be the global, we're going to say, kind of how we connect with the global as well. So that's why we did it with Routledge. It was Routledge or any other one. That's what we wanted, that it had an international coverage. So that, as I said, we need to talk to other people. We need to connect what's happening in here and overseas as well. So that's why we did it.
Okay. Well, thank you, Malba, so far. Your explanation, your rationale for the book sounds really interesting. And I think this also brings me quite well to the next question that I have. You talked about like globalization, you talk about international and national perspectives, and more so on hearing about research from the Chilean context. What I find quite interesting is this cultural perspective, and when we talk about when we consider Caju's definition of the inner circle, emerging and outer circle, what I've seen is that English, even as a lingua franca, is often taught from an inner circle perspective. So when we have tasks, we have these tasks from little Timmy who's strolling across Hyde Park. And I keep wondering, if I'm somewhere in a rural area in Chile, why would I be bothered about little Timmy's walk in Hyde Park? So how do you feel are the emerging local needs from the Chilean context are considered, or what needs to be done to localize L2 teaching from the perspective, from the local Chilean perspective, in the future, to just improve, also maybe linking this back to attitudes, to creating relevance in this context?
Yeah. Very good question. And actually I couldn't agree more about kind of this idea of people say that they are teaching English as a lingua franca, as an international language. However, they teach it from an inner perspective. And that's why I never use, or I try not to use, English as an international language. I mean, when I'm here, I mean, because of that, because exactly that, because there is unfortunately a misunderstanding of what that would mean. And that's not the idea. So going back, yes, exactly. Timmy and walking through the Hyde Park. This is the thing when I talked about kind of the challenges, kind of the purpose of teaching English. This is it, and this is the core of it. So we talked previously about kind of two main things that has been in the tradition of why teaching English in Chile has been because of economic opportunities. This illusion, I would say, this illusion of earning more money, having sort of fun jobs, and this thing of being international as something super good. But international from certain parts of the world, not from others. Now we have encountered that, and more vividly through recent migrations, that actually, no, those people, no, I don't mean that. I mean other people. That's right. And English sort of perpetuates and emphasizes that kind of the difference. And going back to kind of what could we do? I think we could exactly find different purposes and making it happen. One thing that we don't have to forget, we human beings are super complex and we like learning. We enjoy learning. And learning a language is super interesting. It is. I mean, from kind of all trying to understand how it works, but also making it your own. That, I mean, in itself, it is a very beautiful thing. And everything that kind of comes together with the language. And of course, depending on the definition of the language, are we still talking about a set of rules, or are we talking about something else? If we're talking about something else, lots of other cultural representations come hand in hand. And I'm not referring to Shakespeare. We have to go beyond Shakespeare. I mean, of course, there are people and that enjoy learning the sonnets, for example, Shakespeare's sonnets. I'm not saying that we shouldn't teach that. Yeah, we should teach that, but why not other things as well? And that's the thing. When we talk about culture, what do we mean by that? In the past, some universities talk about kind of the knowledge base of teachers. One subject was called culture and civilization. That perspective today sounds violent, yeah? Because the course was about some traditions in the US and in the UK, especially UK. Yeah, so that's what we meant by civilization. Yeah, I think that nowadays it's not that language is not used. However, there's still some issues. Still sort of covered. It's not all that, but still kind of the aspiration is to go, kind of that we're aspiring to be like that, or knowing about that, to be part of it. So what can we do? What are the purposes? I mentioned one, enjoying learning a language itself. Yeah. Second, English, different from other languages, is spoken around the world, different accents, different Englishes, as you mentioned before. That's in itself wonderful. Yeah? Wonderful to study, to get to know, and what it means. Yeah, all the colonies, let's put it in the past, kind of colonies, the colonies have something else. Indian English, beautiful, beautiful. So complex there, so complex. And within the UK as well, within the UK, so much variety too. Yes. And that we overlook at that. We don't get that, yeah? Not even when we look at kind of the example, Timmy through Hyde Park, yeah, it's London, yeah? Yes. That's the thing. Come on. I mean, UK is much more than London if
and
we want to.
In most cases, you still got RP as well.
Exactly, yes. Exactly. Yeah. That's how we were taught, only one accent. Yeah. What a hilarious thing, yeah? If you think that in the UK there are how many accents? So many, so different and so valuable. So, yeah. So finding a different purpose, yeah, the world English is, as I said, also kind of the idea of learning a language, also kind of if we really want to teach this as a lingua franca, let's start looking at it as a lingua franca. Even with our neighbors here, Brazil. What's the kind of Brazil? Yes, we do this thing of the Portunhol, a bit of Spanish, a bit of Portuguese. However, when we go to a conference in Brazil, we speak English, yeah? And actually, when you really want to go into deeper things, we do speak English, both them and us, yeah? So there we've got a purpose, and they are our neighbors. Massive country. They produce so much research and so many different ideas from us that maybe we could start developing something with them, and that would be a good purpose, yeah? Also Central America as well there, that would be very interesting. So that kind of mentioning sort of a connection, like a geographical connection as well, that would give us a bit of another purpose for learning and teaching English too, and of course the rest of the world. But just to mention certain things, some others I have, and there are some of bits in the book. It's about kind of using English or learning English to exactly be part of this global world and allow other people to know Chile and the many issues about Chile. I know I have used the thing Chile very big, and some people have criticized Malba. Your study is in Santiago, so it's not Chile. I have received that critique, and I am very responsible for that. But I still continue using Chile. It's true. It's not. It's a few studies are around Santiago and very different from other regions and other communities. However, if we don't put it in the global conversation, it's like we don't exist. Yeah. And teacher education programs mostly have developed what they teach today based on that, based on systems, completely different systems with very different purposes. So we just take and we implement. Of course, it doesn't work, yeah, but we continue doing it, yeah. So important, to have the global conversations and to use English for that, yeah. There are many projects, and some people in the book talks about that kind of projects about how, for example, we can teach English to our students, and then they can become activists, and that's why they use English, and they need to be proficient to talk to everyone as one way to advocate for their own rights in the country and, of course, outside the country as well.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I think, well, we were talking about this at the beginning, like the idea of levels and proficiency. I mean, if we think about our own Chilean context, this is one of the, let's say, big problems. Should we focus only on proficiency? Should we focus on teacher education? Should we focus on both? Which one should? What would be, let's say, your view? Because many people talk about teachers should always end or graduate with a C1 level, but that doesn't really mean that they're going to be like good teachers. So I don't know if what would be your perspective on that, Malva?
Yeah. Oh, very good question. And of course, this we have I mean, I don't know if we have discussed this publicly a lot or enough. Because this is a big issue, and this is one of the contradictions of kind of the standards of teacher education. Super contradictory. The standards requires teachers, graduates, to be able to do and to know many things, actually many, and from my perspective, impossible for a graduate. To do it effectively. That's what I'm saying. But what can you do? In the end, the programs, what they do, okay, this one, tick the C1 level, because to a certain extent is easier than the others. Yeah. And you have a measure, international measure, so then, you do it. And I'm not saying that that's wrong in itself, because teachers of English, of course, they should be proficient. No doubt about it. You cannot teach what you don't know. However, that's not enough. I mean, there is so much research that actually says that I think it's kind of, how on earth that is it that we continue sort of doing this as the only probably test that students in the teacher education program they sit for is that test. Either from Cambridge or from any other of these big publishers and companies, they do sit, not for any other thing. So that tells us how we continue perpetuating the idea that in the end, teachers of English is someone who speaks English and that's it, We know that that's it. It's not enough. So we need to focus on the other things, and this is the battle that we have every day. A few years ago, I did one study in which with student teachers in third year, and we taught them how, there is quite a bit of evidence that says that teachers need to facilitate comprehensibility, in this case, English language comprehensibility. That's a key practice, a key core practice, pedagogical practice. So we made efforts and we did an intervention in which we taught student teachers how to do that. And we did a cycle because we worked at university, but we also asked them to implement it at school. So we follow them and we work with them and all that. And the level of English, let's put it, of those student teachers, super high. In C levels, in Cambridge levels would be C1 and C2. Yeah. So that was not an issue. It was not an issue at all. However, it doesn't correspond how they facilitated. There was no correlation between kind of how they facilitated English language comprehensibility and the level of proficiency. In other words, they were very proficient, as I told you, student teachers. However, their facilitation, was very poor, or not good enough. So, and what I'm trying to tell you is that an effective English teacher requires many other things, and not just being proficient in the language. And so those things like that one should be done and done many other times. One of the reasons why they were not able to facilitate language comprehensible effectively was because their own beliefs and also their kind of the training they had before, and so that's to say kind of their mindset toward teaching. So this thing of kind of, for example, using Spanish only in the class was kind of very very contradictory to their own views. However, they even didn't see a purpose of making a difference, trying many strategies, if in the end, and look at what I'm going to say, if they say, oh, these students are not interested, they will never do anything with English. That's what they say.
Yeah.
So their belief was so strong that they didn't believe in the students' capacity to learn a language. So then my question was, so then why bother then? Why are we doing this, what we're doing? Why are we teaching anything in the end?
Yeah.
Wow. No, I mean, I think this links back very well with attitudes in general, right? I mean, it doesn't really matter the students or the learner's attitude if the teacher enters the classroom with an attitude, with quite a dismissive attitude of like, you're not going to use, learn, or do anything with it anyway. So let's just watch, I don't know, 101 Dalmatians, and then we call it a day.
Exactly. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's in English, at least in English. But
exactly.
Whatever.
100%. Well, I think this links in with my next question quite well. When we talk about inclusivity and supportiveness, how do you think teacher education could become more inclusive and also supportive to produce a somewhat critical teacher? If that makes sense. Critical in the sense of criticality as in like a higher order cognitive skill, as well as criticality in terms of selecting what works and what doesn't work with my students in my context.
So look, I think going back to the first question of today, kind of the challenges of teacher education, I think in terms of curriculum, we need to make very dramatic changes in the curriculum. On one hand, I think kind of what has been established as kind of the content needs to change. However, because we've got policy and we've got kind of the standards, and teacher education programs have to meet those standards. Now, if you analyze kind of the curriculum of probably 30 university programs, you will see not much of a difference. And that's because of the standards. So, what can you do? I think we need to find first room. I mean, we have to meet certain things, but at the same time, we have to do other things. And one of the things that we could do, it's like we were talking before, world Englishes. How much do the current teachers of English know about that? And how not only know it at, there are Englishes, to what extent do they put that perspective into their own teaching? And I'm not sure about that. I don't think in terms of a curriculum that's given. On the contrary, I think it's something probably in the culture and civilization class, they talk about it. Well, nowadays it's called different things, language and culture. Know how in different universities, but kind of something about culture. They put that there, but that is not linked to how you teach the language. So that's a big thing, and you can do that without even altering a kind of the meeting the standards. That will not change at all. It's something little, but super, super important. Also kind of, as I said, we have to kind of disrupt what we do. As you said, high expectations. The example I gave before was someone who had very low expectations. We have to develop teachers that can actually have high expectations from their students. So how we can do that, of course, we need to do that in the university as well, with many sort of activities in which we demystify the thing that, I'm going to say something terrible, but I have heard these directly and also in a very kind of covered way. Poor people cannot learn. Vulnerable schools, it's a waste of time to go there and to teach English. Also, this is the thing, and this goes beyond kind of talking about English, attached to elites, attached to social class, that it's ridiculous if you think about it. Kind of like a language belonging to one group of people. So if we don't change that, and that has to do with attitudes and also the purpose, and I would say agency, teacher agency, capacity to act and in this case, toward the development of those children at school. English is a tool. It's one thing. But if you think that your students will not learn that tool, what's the point? What's the point of it? And that's something you have to do at university many times, and link. Typically, these courses are sort of capsules or modules, like they are very isolated. They are not articulated with anything else. And that's an issue in terms of curriculum as well. Things have to be articulated in a way that, for example, a perspective on, English is linked to the didactic or how to teach that language. So that is implemented. And then, of course, social justice perspective as well. These conversations about the purpose of English are not common in teacher education. They are taken for granted, and then we perpetuate one view. And then, of course, if we associate learning English with economic development, of course, it's very easy to explain why that teacher would say, "Oh, these students will not," because it's it's a determinist view about it, that's I would say, they kind of use the language for meaningful purposes. So who limits or who defines what meaningful purpose is? I don't know.
That's a more philosophical, reflection for sure. But absolutely. I mean, it has a really big effect, like what you were saying, also what Kevin was saying, like the expectation. If imagine a teacher with low expectations is going to get like really poor results.
Yeah.
Exactly.
No, I just remembered like a little research project I did last year at a Chilean university, where I was teaching. It was like a workshop-based module. And I gave a class on technology-enhanced methods to teach criticality to student teachers as well as for their application in the classroom. There was two observations that I found quite interesting. I think that kind of resonate with your observations as well. Well, first of all, it was a voluntary module, so I had a very small cohort. I still about 12 people, which was
that's fine.
Surprising. And the second observation was like the end of the module saw them prepare a task, a critical task, which kind of localizes a learning point or a learning goal and puts it into the Chilean context.
Yeah.
And what those are fourth and fifth year students, the tasks they designed, I was very impressed because, the tasks were really good and they addressed things from Chilean history. They addressed environmental issues with mining. So I think it does depend, to link this back to what you said. I think the capability definitely is there. And it really depends on, I think, someone taking this step and, breaking through the glass ceiling and saying, all right, listen, we're going to do this differently. Where there's a lot of institutional and policy obstacles along the way to actually get there, as you probably can confirm. But once you get into this space, students are or seem to be both interested and very capable of actually being extremely creative and localized, taking Timmy from Hyde Park, putting him on the plane and dropping him off somewhere in Atacama and showing him around there, to use this metaphor.
Yeah, exactly.
So, this is extremely fascinating, but also clearly there's a lot of obstacles on the way.
Yeah. Oh, and something related to this is kind of something that teacher education programs could do, as you were doing. It's also work on the materials, the ELT materials. Teachers, it's a typical complaint. They complain about the quality of the textbooks. However, there are different types of complaints, I would say. The typical one is that the textbook given is not aligned to actually the program, the syllabus they have to follow. So it's like kind of misaligned. So it's very difficult. And then another typical comment from a school teacher teachers is that they would say, oh, it's not necessarily addressing my students' needs, etc., because of level of English, or as you are discussing, because of kind of local things. All of them, yes, I agree. It's true. They are not aligned. However, when you see the use of the textbooks, there you see, and this is a kind of probably from the teacher education, lack of training regarding that, and how we can look at the thing from a different perspective. And we don't do that much, it's not part of the curriculum, and I'm not saying you don't need a course like textbook material or how to use a textbook. You don't need to have a specific course. You need to do it in other things, then kind of link it, because I'm sure your class was not about that specifically, was it?
About what? About materials development?
Yeah, kind of, because the task, that's what teachers do. They have to create tasks, they have to create activities, right? But then it's like kind of something that we could even start. It's not even creating, but adapting what they already have, because they are going to be given. Yeah, they're going to be giving that. Yeah, so, yeah. But it was not about task creation, your course, right?
It linked back to it every now and again. We talked about concepts, we talked about how technology can be used to either supplement existing tasks or to create new ones.
Yeah.
It wasn't exclusively about task design. Linked, the theory linked back to task design.
Yeah, that's good, and that's something we should do kind of more, I would say. If it was a kind of an optional module, you said 12 students out of a cohort probably of 50 or more. Yeah, it's not a bad number. However, it's not kind of a trend or a pattern for everyone. So that's something that we should do more, definitely, and that would help.
It's something that I would... Sorry,
exactly, you would do.
That I would know. I would love to see integrated into curriculum large scale, nationally and also internationally. So I think it does really help and give teachers a lot of agency back as well.
Yeah. Of course. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's a point you've said. Many teachers feel they cannot do anything. Many teachers. Student teachers do. They come back after the practicum or during the practicum and say, this is impossible. I cannot do anything. I even tried once, twice, and then things didn't work, and I cannot change the material, I cannot change la la la. So, of course, that idea of like, hey, come on, yes, you can. You can change this task, or you can do something here, there, etc. That gives them back their agency, Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. Okay. And now I think we're reaching like the end of this episode. So, Malba, what would be like your final reflections, or how do you think we can move forward with all this interesting maybe conversation and ideas we've discussed today? I think that would be a good point. How then do we move forward?
Excellent question. Yeah, what's next? How do we move forward? We need to get to classrooms, I would say, and kind of getting into the teaching of English itself, per se. How do we teach English and doing it, and bringing these perspectives about kind of, okay, we mentioned today world Englishes, but we can also incorporate interculturality, and I'm not talking about kind of the interculturality probably 20 years ago was in fashion in our country, in which we talked about, getting to know kind of English speaking people, that's great, and be tolerant to that. It goes much more beyond that, and actually it has to do with not only awareness, but also using that knowledge to transform. And language is a tool. English is a tool and can help us with that, to be more tolerant as a society, and not only tolerant, but actually being able to integrate the different types of knowledges and, of course, languages and who we are as well, kind of as a community. So how to move forward? I think this conversation helps that. The books as well, the book I referred today as well, gives us different ideas, discusses theory, but also discusses experiences, classroom experiences, and also provides with some ways, different ways to look at these issues. And we need to, I would say, go beyond kind of what we have to do. Go beyond kind of the standards as we're talking about in terms of teacher education. We can use them, and the standards are it's one thing, but it cannot be the end. It should be just one tool. We can do much more than that. And also kind of the idea of the purpose of English, why we learn English in Chile, why we teach English in Chile. I think we have to make that question several times, and we need to find different answers. There isn't one answer. So different answers, and depending on that purpose, also work on how we teach, being coherent with that purpose as well, and find different resources. Also work together with our neighbors, with other Latin American countries. That's something we need to do, not only when we talk about the world, not only with other countries that are very far. Maybe we can start with our neighbors, and I think that's one way to move forward, and becoming a bit more agentic as well.
Yeah. All right. So thank you, Malba, very much for your time. I know this is a very interesting conversation, and many things that we can actually, continue talking. So Malba, thank you again. And with this, we conclude our, today's episode of ELT in Chile podcast with Dr. Malba Barahona. If you have any questions or comments, you can reach us at podcast@eltinchile.com. And of course, we have a website. The website is www.eltinchile.com. So Malba, thank you very much. And Kevin.
Thank you.
Thank you, Malba.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Take care.